Joining me now is Honorable Eugene Wamalwa, CS for Devolution. He's dealing with a lot of issues there in terms of floods, and there's also the Covid-19, and there's possible drought as well here in the near future, and also locusts invading farms. CS, thanks for making time for us. So far, how many people and how many households have been affected from the records that you have?
Trevor, thank you for having me again. We talked last week after the landslides in Elgeyo Marakwet, West Pokot. We had other landslides in Kipkelion and other parts of the country. And the rains have continued in different parts of the country as forecasted by our meteorological department. And so far, we have lost 116 lives in different parts of the country. And we have had about 100,000, over 100,000 households actually affected. In terms of displacement, these will put us at almost 500,000 Kenyans who have been displaced by these floods so far. And the rains continue to pound all the areas we had warned before. The coastal strip, the rains are very heavy. You can see floods in Tana River and other parts of the coast. In northern Kenya, Garissa is flooded, and other parts like Wajir, they are all affected by these heavy rains. But the most affected is the Lake Basin. As you know, the Nyando area has been affected for quite a while. Budalangi has been the hardest hit. The dikes that we put up a few years ago, because of River Nzoia breaking its banks, we have actually lost some of the dikes now as we speak, and this has caused further displacement of people. So these are the situation that we are facing in different parts of the country, and we are still urging Kenyans living near rivers and landslide and flood-prone areas to keep moving to safer ground, because the rains are still going on into May, and we do not wish to lose more lives or have more displacements.
You mentioned 116 people have been killed so far. In a span of how long has that been?
Since the long rain started, and as you know, we normally have these long rains between March up to May.
Yeah.
And we are hoping from June the rain should have subsided. Our experts are telling us that the rains will continue being heavy in Western Kenya, parts of Rift Valley, at the coast. But the prediction is that from next week, after 4th, we should see the rain subsiding in northern Kenya, though this should not make the northern counties relax. We're going into a meeting with the 10 FCDC counties of northern Kenya that are perennially affected by drought as well as floods, so that we keep working around the clock to ensure that we save lives and we prevent any further loss of life or property.
So there's been more than 29 counties that are affected by floods right now. What is the plan to ensure that the people inundated there are given food supplies?
So far, from last week, we stepped up support to the affected counties. As you rightly say, there are 29 counties affected so far. And from last week up to this morning, we have been able to supply over 40,000 bags of rice and other assorted items and non-food items. We are grateful to the Red Cross and other donors who are also supporting the counties. And the counties are also doing very, very well. We want to thank the governors and urge them to work with their county assemblies to reallocate more funding towards the disaster emergency funds, so that they are able to respond as our first line of defense. But for us as national government, we want to assure all the affected counties and all the affected families that we have enough food, and we'll continue supporting all affected going into May and June, when the situation is supposed to normalize.
So you've released 40,000 bags of rice. How much more food do you have, CS? Because we know right after this, there's going to be a drought, and at the same time, most of the crops have been swept away by the raging waters.
We do know that even when the rains subside, as the experts are telling us, we will still need to continue supporting the affected families. And as CS Agriculture, Peter Munya said last week, fortunately, because of the good rains we've had, both the short rains and the long rains, the food situation in the country is stable. We have enough food. And as the Ministry for Special Programs, we want to assure Kenyans we have enough food. Beginning next week, I will be launching the second round of relief food supplies to the affected counties. And we will, in the second round, be laying more emphasis on counties that are overwhelmed by this disaster. And we continue working closely with all the affected counties and our county commissioners and the governors to ensure that we're able to support these families. But as I said yesterday in the joint press release with the Ministry of Health, we are urging the counties affected that even as we bring this food to you, please observe the protocols on food distribution that have been set by the Ministry of Health, because if this food is mishandled also, and social distancing is not observed, sanitizers are not supplied, we could actually end up causing more problems. And we urge that we work through the county emergency teams, co-chaired by our governors and our county commissioners. So all our politicians, well-wishers, please adhere to the Ministry of Health guidelines so that this food is able to bring relief, not to bring further stress or exposure to the affected families.
And that right there is a big risk, CS, because we've seen people scrambling for food before and social distancing completely being disregarded. The other concern has always been favoritism by the people who are distributing the food. They give it first to their relatives and people who they have a good rapport with first. How is this going? How are you going to ensure as a government that the food reaches the people who are most vulnerable?
As I've said, we have set protocols, but there were unfortunate incidences here and there when well-wishers started giving food, and we had people scrambling. There were quite some injuries, and in the process, this exposes more people to the COVID-19. Instead of helping, we are actually causing more problems. That is why we've asked that the food distribution protocols that have been given must strictly be observed, and we are working closely with the governors to ensure that this is done.
So, CS, we've spoken about these issues of having water pans and dams and creating dikes. How far is the process of ensuring that raging flood waters doesn't really affect us that much? Are we even harvesting this water to begin with?
Trevor, we have made quite some progress. As I told you in our last interview, there are quite a number of new dams that are under construction. In Kirinyaga, we have Thiba Dam. In Ukambani, we have the largest dam, Thwake Dam, that's under construction. We have also started 3 other dams in Turkana, West Pokot, and Marsabit. And what we are urging Kenyans is for them to cooperate with government, because we know in an area like Budalangi, where the dikes have broken, we have 5 billion that has already been set aside for the project for permanent dikes. These will replace the dikes that we had constructed a few years ago. These dikes have been holding, they are saving lives, but they've started breaking. So we need land, and Kenyans must give way so that we're able to put this infrastructure in place to save lives. In West Pokot and Turkana, the 3 new dams, the Marsabit one is ongoing, but we have litigation on the new dams in West Pokot and Turkana. And we want to urge Kenyans, we have to construct these dams so that we harvest this water. We'll have abnormal rains that can be a resource so that we use it for irrigation and other purposes. But when you prevent construction of these dams, you are not willing to give away in terms of land, and you engage in litigation to delay these dams, then we will not achieve our targets as projected.
And I was speaking to Tana River Governor yesterday, and he was saying that there still needs to be a bit of coordination between the national government and the county governments. He was speaking about the whole Garissa Highway, saying that it's been made several times, but it's not being made up to standard. Are you concerned with those projects that are in some of those marginalized counties?
Yes, we are, and I can assure you that the formerly marginalized counties are now receiving serious attention. If you go to northern Kenya, roads have been constructed connecting us to Isiolo, to Moyale that had not been there before, from Garissa to Modogashe, and from Modogashe onwards. All these roads are under construction, and they are being prioritized. But we know that when we have floods, they have very devastating effects, not just on human life and property, but also our infrastructure. There are quite a number of bridges that have been swept away. The road to Narok, when you go to Nyanza, we are still, I was very happy to see one of the bridges that have been rebuilt very quickly. So this is expected, but we want to assure all counties with devolution, there will be no marginalization. No part of the country will be left behind, and we will address development, equitable development as a priority.
All right, CS, as we come to an end, you had mentioned in our last conversation that there would be a cabinet decision on who is considered vulnerable and how much is going to be distributed to them. How far is that?
That has already been completed. From next week. We will be rolling out, and there will definitely be a statement next week as we roll out. The vulnerable populations have already been identified. We work very closely with the governors, and even as we are distributing this relief food, we want it to go to the vulnerable families. And we ask that Kenyans be sensitive to that, so that food goes to those who are really in need, and we are able to cushion them against these adversities.
So do we have enough funds to sustain this project long term, CS?
Yes, we do have sufficient funds, and as I've told you, we're just going into a meeting with 10 counties of northern Kenya with our development partners. They want to see what more they can do. They are realigning the funding that has been given for other projects, development projects, towards addressing the crisis at hand. And we've also asked our counties to do the same, so that they work with their county assemblies to realign their budgets towards addressing this emergency. We believe we have sufficient funding, and we will give sufficient support to all affected counties and all affected families.
Do you have an approximate figure, or is this still a work in progress because there are several people plugging in?
That is work in progress, and we're engaging our partners as we engage the counties this morning. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, CS. That's